Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this next hour. It's good to have you with us. We're incredibly excited to share with you what's in store for 2022, and we've got a great range of speakers here with us this morning. But if you'll indulge me for just a moment to take you through some of the successes of 2021, which was not a straightforward year by any stretch of the imagination. So 2021 gifted us with not one, but two films which made it into the UK all-time top 10. So you can see Bond there, sort of wedged between two previous Bonds, Skyfall and Spectre. So that's the number 3 film of the year. But I think even more remarkably, we've got Spider-Man there at number 7. So Spider-Man, if you remember, was released in the midst of the Omicron variant and the Plan B restrictions, and it still went on to be the number 7 film of all time in the UK. So the success of these films, alongside many other exclusive theatrical releases, resulted in 74 million admissions. That's just been confirmed today for last year, which is a whopping 60% increase on 2020. And this year, we are expecting admissions to start moving towards 2019 levels, which in itself was an incredibly successful year, record-breaking year, in fact. So audiences are back, and brands are benefiting from these attentive cinema goers. Apologies if you can hear that drilling outside, but with the rise of the attention economy, there's no doubt at all that cinema delivers on this metric. And our mission here at Pearl & Dean is to bring brands and films closer together and really build and enhance that emotionally attentive audience that we have. So I'm delighted to announce that we have a new brand experience agency joining the Pearl & Dean family. And I are an agency that's got doing some fantastic work. Our first panel will be introduced by and hosted by Catherine, who's our head of agency strategy, and she'll be joined by an illustrious panel of speakers whom she'll introduce in a moment. Our next speaker of the morning will be Phil Clapp, who is the CEO of the UK Cinema Association, and he is sort of the guru on everything to do with cinemas in the UK. So I look forward to hearing from Phil after Catherine. And then rounding up this morning, we will have Cristina, who is Pearl & Dean's head of agency trading and film expert. So she'll take us through some of the fantastic films that we have on release exclusively in cinemas, because we are back to that exclusive theatrical window, and we'll look forward to seeing what we've got from her. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so please use the Q&A function, post your questions, and Jamie from Pearl & Dean will be running that session. So I'll now hand over to Catherine and enjoy.
Muted. Thank you, Claire. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Cinema, It's All About the Experience. One thing's for certain, the pandemic has absolutely reinforced people's desire for shared experiences beyond the home, and that certainly does position cinema very strongly for the future. And so today we're going to be speaking about how brands can really take advantage of that desire for experiences, but also at the same time really positively enhancing the experiences for audiences. And so to do that, we're going to be joined today by a brilliant panel, two of whom are two clients who have specifically chosen cinema to execute long-term strategic partnerships, as well as two specialists that we work with in the experiential and film partnership space. So I will make some introductions. Our first panelist is Markus Carlson. Markus is National Communications Manager for Jaguar. And then we have Vicky Handley. Vicky is Senior Manager, Retail Brand Comms and Media for Lloyds Bank Group. And then next we have Ellie Davidson. Ellie is Executive Director of Dive, which Claire mentioned. And then finally, we have John Ridley. John is our film partnerships consultant at Pearl & Dean. We've been working with him for, I think, coming up to about 7 years now. So my first question is for Markus. Markus, we originally launched our partnership between Jaguar, Everyman and the BFI back in, I think, October 2020, which just seems like such a long time ago now. Height of the pandemic, if I recall, it was probably days before we just went into that second lockdown. Despite its unfortunate timing, however, this campaign has been a real success, and you've just renewed for 2022 as well, which is brilliant. Can you share with the audience what this partnership is that we've created together and why cinema has been such a key medium for Jaguar to achieve their campaign objectives?
Yeah, so obviously, like you said, this has been quite a while to get to the point of going live, and I believe even before we went live in October 2020, at the height of the pandemic, we had begun discussions. I dare to say 1 year earlier than that, but the beginning of the pandemic sidetracked us a bit. But because Jaguar is a brand with a strong heritage within film and culture, we've been partners of James Bond, for instance, for many years now. It's sort of a natural sort of heartland area for us, which we haven't really operated in too much in recent years. So we thought actually it's time for us to get back into the real deal of supporting that culture and heritage that we've been part of for such a long time. So for us, cinema and particularly Everyman kind of gives us that platform of a more bespoke premium experience where we have a captive audience and we're able to sort of share with the true movers and shakers within the industry of cultures and arts, and with the support of the BFI, so with the Women with a Movie Camera initiative, we're also able to kind of support those who are up and coming in that, and combining the forces of us as a culture brand and BFI and Everyman, we have been able to sort of use our own friends of the brand to create, where we had the premiere of Billie Piper's film back on the 19th of May of last year. Let's check, am I still on? Because my screen just went all black.
Yeah, we lost you a little bit, but then you came back. It's all good.
Yeah, my laptop seemed to do a bit of a reboot, which is always timely. Yeah, I was just saying we've been able to use the partnership as a bit of a platform to drive our brand overall, which has been great over the past year. Absolutely.
And I guess a global pandemic isn't the most ideal time to be launching a massive cinema partnership, but they do say that often, adversity and opportunity go hand in hand. Can you tell us how, despite all the uncertainty and challenges that COVID has brought upon us, this campaign has actually evolved and gone from strength to strength?
Yes, so for us, if we were to back out because of the pandemic, we would kind of not be true to what I said in the beginning of this, where we are a culture-based brand with a strong heritage in film and entertainment. So for us, it was an obvious thing to sort of stay put and ride out the storm whilst we waited for restrictions to lift. And that's really how this come about, and we've seen with the events we've had and the uptake, and later tonight we have another event for the UK premiere of Nightmare Alley. It's an immersive event up on Screen on Green, which is going to be absolutely brilliant, and these are the kind of opportunities that are too good to miss for a brand like ours, where we do want to engage on a slightly deeper level with our audience. For us, it's not about maximum reach through multiplexes and such, but to create a more genuine connection, but both between the audience and also the creators within the industry, to recognize us as a brand to work with when it comes to culture and entertainment.
Absolutely, thank you very much, Markus. Vicky, if I could come on to you next. So Lloyds have always been a huge supporter of cinema as a medium. What is it about cinema that makes them such a key channel for Lloyds?
Well, we've been a huge supporter of cinema for many years now, since we brought back the Black Horse at the forefront of our advertising in 2015. And it just really forms an important part of our AV strategy in driving awareness of Lloyds Bank and really bringing to life that Lloyds Bank are by the side of our nation. And, you know, our beautiful cinematographic advertising with such emotive music tracks are just perfect for this media environment. You've got the incredible sound, the scale of the screens, and most importantly, you've got 100% undivided attentive viewers, which really enables our advertising to resonate with huge impact. And I guess finally, cinema also really highly over indexes with our customer base, alongside hitting those light TV viewers within a really premium environment.
Yes, and we just launched on 1st of January our big annual, really exciting partnership, which is all across all screens, but it's you know, a mix of different formats and platforms and partners. Can you please sort of share with the audience what we are doing together and how this cinema experience really delivers for Lloyds?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're thrilled to partner with Powell & Dean this year. It's such a great opportunity to support British cinema, and with such an integrated platform across cinema, digital, social and outdoor cinema, this has enabled us to really deepen the relationship with cinema goers in a way that's both engaging and relevant. So kind of with premieres, really enables us to have an always-on presence in cinema, whilst also creating bespoke content, adding value to the overall audience's experience of the advertising. And we're also able to amplify this through both social and digital channels, which is great. And also with kind of another step, but also with Lloyds Bank being such an iconic leadership British brand, the BFI element of the partnership is such a fantastic opportunity to demonstrate our support for British film in such a premium way, especially with this year being such an exciting year for British filmmakers. And finally, Luna Outdoor Cinemas are located in such beautiful, prestigious, iconic British heritage sites, which really play into the heartland of our Lloyds Bank brand strategy. And, you know, as we go through the year, we've got some really exciting opportunities as part of this partnership to create contextually relevant, engaging content that we're all super excited about.
Yeah, it's such an exciting partnership, Vicky, and we're so thrilled. As you mentioned, relevance. It's so important. I mean, I think a stat that keeps coming through with Fame is that 80% of audiences are fully seated before any of the advertising begins. So I think any ways that brands can do things like branded content and just make the content a bit more relevant to the cinema environment or film in general is always going to really positively enhance their experience of the advertising reel, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you very much, Vicky. So kind of moving more into the experiential space now, Ellie, I'm going to ask you a question. How can brands make a big impact beyond the big screen with audiences?
Hi, yeah, well, we've had some really great live examples there, I guess, from Markus and Vicky, which hopefully really sort of demonstrate some of the points that I'm going to make really well. At Dive, we create partnerships, campaigns and productions across the sort of whole spectrum of film. So, and they're all built around the simple concept of essentially making people's free time better. You know, free time is that is when we're almost ourselves, essentially. It's the sort of the time in our lives when we actually get to choose what we want to do on the purest level. And so that's also an incredibly sort of important and powerful time for a brand to access if done in the right way. And I think brands that can improve people's free time in a responsible but also creative and useful way, you know, specifically now, will create strong and lasting connections with audiences. And so the best way for a brand to create a big impact in film and cinema beyond the ad spot, you know, on screen, is to either, you know, create those unique shared experiences themselves, but, you know, fully in partnership with the industry, or to really genuinely add something positive to the existing experience. You know, brands can create and enhance those sort of powerful moments in film and cinema, but it really has to be done in a mutually beneficial way. It needs to be sort of truly in partnership with film. And with cinema, there are so many key audience touch points besides the big screen that a brand can access and add genuine value to. And yourself and Vicky just mentioned a few there. You know, building partnerships in this space that support the cinemas, as with the Lloyds partnership, as well as enhancing the consumer experience. It's key, and that's what yields great results. And the last thing I'll mention, just on the sort of experience front, is that when we look at film related experiences and content creation and stunts, both in cinema and beyond at the moment, these things are becoming more and more important for the big studios and distributors to embrace, as competition for awareness and choice increases, driven by the likes of the big streaming giants. We're seeing brands like Netflix and Amazon spending more on non-traditional marketing and experiential to really drive buzz and excitement of their releases. And there's incredible content at the indie end of the market as well. So here, brands can make a real difference by supporting these releases, with their in-cinema plans, launch plans, distribution plans, and in return gain access to amazing content and experiences.
Definitely. Can you also give us some examples of brand campaigns that you've worked on in the past that have worked particularly well for cinema?
Yeah, sure thing. The most recent project we worked on that I'll mention was an experiential partnership between Green and Blacks and Everyman. Green and Blacks essentially wanted to align themselves really firmly with film and focus also on their delicious organic ingredients of their chocolate bars, or bring that out for the audience. And so we created a partnership campaign called The Flavour of Film, which was essentially a chocolate, film and cocktail pairing experience that went across all of the Everyman cinemas. So we matched 4 of their organic chocolate bars with 4 different films and cocktails. And then on opening weekends of those titles, consumers received, a free chocolate bar in screen while they watched the film, and were recommended a cocktail to purchase. The films that we worked with, so it was all new releases. So The French Dispatch, Last Night in Soho, House of Gucci and Silent Night. And the partnership was welcomed really by both the film distributors and Everyman, because it helped twofold in a way. It helped drive opening weekends for the films, and it also helped enhance the overall, cinema customer experience, which is really key to Everyman's success. They always put that first. And as part of the same campaign, we also took over Everyman's stunning flagship Broadgate Cinema. That's definitely worth a visit for anyone that's not been. And we created a special Christmas-themed premiere of Silent Night, which we worked really closely to support Altitude, who were releasing the film. And then the event was presented and funded by Green and Blacks, which essentially allowed them to present their flavour of film pairing experience sort of in full to all the customers and talent and press that attended. And a couple of others I'll quickly mention. One is a partnership between Birra Moretti and the Luna Cinema that we're working on. And Luna is the UK's leading operator of open air cinema. And this one is Moretti are bringing an al fresco Italian sort of style bar experience to Luna's customers, and in return gaining access to their audience and estate, which Vicky mentioned, that it includes stunning venues across the country. I think over 60 venues and around 180 screenings during the summer. One last really successful partnership campaign that I worked on for many years was the E4 Slackers Club a little while back, and that was a partnership between E4 and indie cinemas that essentially enabled students to go to free monthly screenings of new films at their local cinema. It ran for 9 years. It became a key marketing tool for distribution as well, to use when they had a film that they needed to, access a student audience for. They would screen that film through this club. It was successful for E4 because it was a way for them to engage with their core audience beyond their channel and reward them. And for the cinemas, it helped drive a student audience, back into their local cinema.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting sort of opportunity, I think, especially kind of coming out of the pandemic. How can we use partnerships to grow cinema audiences, particularly youngs and mothers and babies and things like that? Thanks, Ellie. Some really good examples there. I'm going to move on to John now and the wonderful world of film partnerships. So, John, in your role as film partnerships consultant, you work closely with the film distributors to identify and implement mutually beneficial promotional alliances between brands and film. Can you speak about what some of the benefits are of doing a film partnership?
Yeah, I think there's lots of benefits. I could talk for half an hour probably on that, but I think if I was to pick out 2 of the really key ones, the first one would be for allowing brands to get access to the film intellectual property, so the IP that exists around film. I did a partnership with Shell on Mission Impossible a couple of years ago, and through that partnership, Shell got access to imagery of Tom Cruise that they could feature in their forecourt promotion and through their above the line activity. So essentially they're getting Tom Cruise in their ad campaign without paying any money to Tom Cruise. The way a film partnership works is that a brand funds the above the line activity and then the film distributor gives access to that IP. So that's a massive benefit and probably the biggest benefit. But I think the other point, and I think Markus touched on this earlier, is that film really does give brands the opportunity to access key cultural moments. You know, there's always the latest film that's coming out in the cinema, and it's always current. Film is always of the moment. And I think also the other big benefit of film partnerships is that there really is something for everyone. So whether you're looking to target a male, a female, a diverse audience, kids, families, whoever it is, there'll always be a film that's coming out for that audience. And I think they're the two really strong benefits of film partnerships.
Perfect, thanks, John. And I guess most film partnerships, they tend to live outside of the cinema environment, don't they? Whether it's, you know, you see them above the line campaigns or on-pack or in-store promotions. But can you speak about perhaps some examples of film partnerships that you've worked on that actually exist within cinema environments, and how do those partnerships enhance the audience's experience? Yeah,
I mean, it's hard to believe given my youthful looks, I know, but I started working in the film industry in the late 90s, and back then probably only 200 films were being released in cinema. So really film distributors, they just weren't interested in having support for their films in cinema through brand partnerships because they got the trailering space. But when we fast forward 20 years to 2019, we had nearly 1,000 films coming out in the cinema. And really that means that the film distributors are really fighting to get exposure for their films within the cinema environment as well as outside the cinema environment. And that's really changed the dynamic. And some real great examples, maybe I'll just list three. Obviously working with Jaguar, we've got this amazing immersive experience with Nightmare Alley tonight. And that really is just bringing the real brand theatre into the cinema space, and that just wouldn't have been possible without Jaguar's involvement. You know, so it really is Jaguar who are bringing that amazing experience to every man's customers, and obviously that benefits Jaguar, it benefits every man, but of course it also benefits Searchlight Pictures, the distributor of the film, because they're getting amazing exposure for their film. Cinema's also great for preview screening programs. We did a really good partnership with EDF Energy on the film Hidden Figures. So EDF Energy had a corporate responsibility message to encourage young girls to do STEM subjects at school. And if you're familiar with the Hidden Figures film about the African-American women who helped get NASA into space, so the messaging fitted really well, and we were able to do preview screenings of that film for local schools, which really helped encourage the message of the promotion. And then finally, we can't do a webinar without mentioning our iconic Pearl and Dean Papa Papa. And we've done some really great partnerships with brands and distributors on that. And I think a real highlight of one there is the partnership we did with Hosetd and Sherlock Gnomes, where we got the Pearl and Dean music playing over the characters from Sherlock Gnomes dancing on top of a loaf of Hosetd bread. And it just created great standout and really great fun, and it was a really key part of the partnership for Hosetd.
Thanks, John. Some very good examples there. And another one is the Bohemian Rhapsody partnership we did with Brian May remixing the Pearl and Dean theme tune, which was pretty surreal hearing that for the first time. Yeah. Thank you. I've just got time for one more question, and Ellie, I'd like to come back to you for this one. So it's been great to hear you share some of the things that you've worked on, particularly in the outdoor space as well as within boutique cinemas. I'm just thinking about scale, and how could brands maybe bring life into the multiplex space? What's possible there?
Sure thing. Yeah, I guess the beauty of the multiplexes, or the difference, is that, you know, as well as audience scale, of course, as you mentioned, they also have so much physical space for a brand to access to, you know, be that in foyers, the obvious one, but also in the screens themselves, and often externally on the actual buildings themselves as well. If you think about the physical space and the walls and everything that allows a brand to use, the opportunity for brands to create sort of large scale, engaging, interactive experiences on site at these cinemas, to even look at sort of full branded takeovers of the cinemas themselves, to sort of help create more of an entertainment destination in some instances, you know, pre-film, is a real opportunity. I think in all cinemas, you know, as well as the marketing opportunity, there is, of course, the retail potential that can be explored too, you know, and specifically that's at more of a scale at the multiplexes. With the HFSS regulations coming into play later this year, cinema can provide an environment for those brands that are affected by that, you know, specifically to reach their customers in a controlled way, and also still do sampling and also have a kind of clear direct connection to retail. So, you know, I feel that also the potential, I guess, for multiplexes, the potential that they offer has not really been fully explored for quite some time. So I think there's a real opportunity there to do something unique.
Yeah, completely agree. The foyer is an interesting part of the consumer journey, isn't it? Because it's, you know, you've arrived, you've parked, you've got your tickets, you can finally relax when you're in the foyer, and that's when, you know, you've got 2.5 hours of pure escapism ahead of you. And I think, you know, again, Fame is saying 17 minutes is still the average dwell time in foyers. So there's a good amount of time, I think, for brands to do some really, really interesting stuff, and also just to inject a bit of fun into the experience. So that's all we have time for today. I have to wrap up now, but I would just like to say a huge thank you to our panelists today, Markus, Vicky, Ellie and John. Thank you so much for sharing such really interesting insights there about, you know, all the things that are possible. And I think a really kind of common theme that's coming through is there really is just such an abundance of opportunity to sort of create more deeper, more meaningful connections with cinema audiences, not just within cinema itself, but, you know, across every touch point of film. So thank you very much for that. I think if anybody has any questions at all for our panelists, as Claire mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing a 5-minute Q&A hosted by Jamie at the end of the webinar. So just put your questions through in the chat. I need to mention that unfortunately Markus is unable to join that, as he has another meeting. But if you do have any questions specifically for Markus, do send those through as well, and we'll be sure to come back to you separately. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Markus, Vicky, Elliot and John. I started in my intro talking about how our mission is to bring brands closer to film, and hopefully that session will inspire and has inspired and demonstrated, you know, just the breadth of opportunities there are for brands, you know, right through from on-screen to film partnerships, and really how I think what came through for me listening to all the speakers is just how, you know, a huge amount of the success of these campaigns is built around, you know, the benefits to the audience. You know, we've got our attentive audience, and creating these partnerships just makes it for a better experience for their visit at the cinema, whether it's an outdoor cinema or a multiplex cinema or an independent. So thank you so much. I'd now like to pass over to, or hand over, should I say, to our next speaker, Phil Clapp, who's the CEO from the UK Cinema Association, and he'll give us an overview really of what will happen, what we think will happen for this year, and what 2022 will bring. So over to you, Phil.
Thanks very much, Claire. And is it morning or afternoon? I think it's just about afternoon. Afternoon, everyone. As Claire said, I head up the UK Cinema Association. I much prefer the description guru of all things cinema, which Claire used, but formally I head up the trade body representing UK cinema operators, with a membership ranging from the very large operators you'll be familiar with, such as Odeon, View and Cineworld, through a very long tail of smaller either regional circuits or a large number, maybe 200 individual single site operators, all of whom have obviously seen a great deal of challenge, but I think looking forward a great deal of opportunity for the sector. My session is titled The Resurgence of Cinema, but it could equally be called The Resilience of Cinema, which I think is something we've seen front and centre in recent times. So while I will look forward, I think there are some lessons and reflections from the experience of cinemas and audiences over the last 2 years or so, which give us an insight into where we might be going, and give us, I think, great confidence in terms of the success of the sector as it continues to rebound from COVID. I mean, the first thing to say is that immediately before COVID, UK cinemas were flying high, as Clare's graphic showed. Admissions in 2018 and 2019 had been the highest for 50 years. And you know, the irony is that in the first quarter of 2020, there were numbers that were outstripping even those levels. So as we look forward to the rest of 2020, you know, there was a great deal of confidence and optimism, and at the same time, you know, and perhaps as a kind of call and response to that, we were also seeing exceptional levels of investment in the cinema infrastructure across the UK. 20 or so new cinemas opening in each of the 5 previous years, and in addition, and not to be underplayed, significant investment in upgrading existing sites. Then, of course, COVID arrived, and to a large degree, the sky fell in. And when cinemas were first required to close back in March 2020, like pretty much everyone else, we had no route map. We didn't really know how cinemas would fare with no income, but we also had no sense of how loyal cinema goers would be while sites were closed, and whether we might, if that closure was prolonged, see some long-term changes in behaviour which might affect the future viability of the sector. The detail of the government and other support which helped answer the first of those questions around how cinemas would fare with no income is probably something best held over for another time. But I want to focus today on how we went about gauging the likely order of response for all that uncertainty, and the lessons it's taught us as we look to the future. The first thing we did was dive into the data. We worked with our counterpart organisation, the Film Distributors Association, to set up a tracking study of attitudes amongst the cinema-going public, so we had a better understanding of these issues, and to ensure that our response was shaped by what was actually happening, rather than what might otherwise be a series of subjective, hopefully well-informed, but still obviously subjective hunches and suppositions. And that survey, which is still ongoing and is now approaching its 13th wave, undertaken by the research agency Metrics Lab, has been and remains an invaluable source of information, and it has to be said, reassurance, as we've sought to navigate the rigors of COVID, and as we've sought to look ahead to recovery. And I think the key and remaining takeouts are that the cinema-going audience has remained and is an incredibly loyal one. And in fact, you know, perhaps despite our expectations, or some people's expectations, during the various lockdown periods, that eagerness to return continually increased. I think refuting the fear that people would in some way get out of a cinema-going habit. And that loyalty is reflected by the point that during both of the major lockdowns, cinema-going was consistently amongst the highest, most missed leisure activities. And as we approached the end of both lockdowns, it reached a point where it was second only to seeing family and friends as the most mixed activity. And it was ranked above eating out, going to the pub, going to the theatre, or seeing sports, which I think, you know, gave us confidence that once cinemas reopened, and it's certainly something we've seen, that the audiences will return. What that data also did was refuted the idea that, having become used to a diet of streaming from their sofa, audiences would lose their appetite for the big screen. And in fact, the data consistently showed that those who consumed the most film content on streaming services during lockdown were also the keenest to return to cinema. And that very much tallies with all we've seen about the fact that those who are the biggest customers of streaming are in fact the most voracious cinema goers. They're people who love film, want to watch film, and they'll choose whether they watch it on the big screen or at home. And when they weren't able to watch it on the big screen, that was the thing that was missing in their diet of film consumption. And I think that's something that we've sought to leverage, and we must continue to seek to leverage as cinemas are open. What the surveys also did, and this is something which is an ongoing thing, is they've given us great reassurance as to public perceptions around the safety of cinemas. Consistently, cinemas in terms of public perception rank higher than any other comparable out-of-home experience, certainly sports, certainly theatre. And we've also seen consistently through the periods when cinemas reopened, and certainly in the period since July last year when they opened, extraordinarily high scores in the high 90% of those returning customers who report they're satisfied or very satisfied with levels of safety and enjoyment. This reflects, of course, the incredibly hard work done by all people working in the cinema sector to ensure that they're in place, kind of enhanced cleaning and hygiene regimes and all sorts of things which probably aren't immediately apparent to those looking from the outside in. But it almost can't be often mentioned often enough that, you know, almost 2 years into the pandemic, it remains the case that not a single case of COVID has been traced back to a UK cinema, which, given the number of admissions, given the diversity of audiences, is a pretty extraordinary feature. The other thing which I think has you know, kind of allowed us to learn lessons over the last 2 years and lessons for the future is around the changing nature of the film slate. It was undoubtedly true that one of the main challenges faced by cinemas during the first unlock, as we now call it, in summer 2020, was a weaker than anticipated film slate, and that was primarily a result of the fact that colleagues at the studios and colleagues in distribution, for a variety of entirely understandable reasons, some related to piracy, some related to, you know, where other major film territories were in terms of cinema being open, they were reluctant to release films or major titles into that environment. And so as a result, with the often quoted and honourable exception of Christopher Nolan's Tenet, maybe, the slate on offer to audiences was weaker, and that reflected, you know, a range of challenge, or that caused a range of challenges, not least in terms of getting a broad audience back in. And so, you know, it was probably no surprise that when we got to the end of 2020, almost now a statement of public record, annual admissions for that year were some 75% down on the previous year. And as we came into the end of the year, there was a kind of point of reflection. And I think while clearly it would have been possible to focus on the negative, the absolute positive that everyone focused on was the period when cinemas were open, the response of audiences, the willingness to return for key titles, and their confidence in the safety of the experience gave us, I think, probably not necessarily for the first time, but certainly unified for the first time, just absolute confidence that the sector would successfully navigate the challenges of COVID. You know, there were a number of tricky moments for our sector, as many others, during that first year. But certainly as we came into 2021, and certainly as we are now, there's absolute confidence that not only can we regain that success we were seeing, but we can build on that and grow that. So, you know, when cinemas were allowed to reopen in July of last year, not only was that positivity in terms of the anticipated audience response, but we actually saw a much stronger film slate, and that reflected the fact that a number of other major cinema territories were open, and you know, cinema and colleagues in film distribution were more confident about releasing films. So while Peter Rabbit 2, not Peter 2, that's a different film, Peter Rabbit 2 led the charge, what we've seen since that point is a regular supply of strong, diverse and audience-friendly titles. And as Claire's pointed out, the two particular high points are of course No Time to Die and Spider-Man No Way Home. I mean, it needs to be said, you know, just to focus on those two. I mean, a Bond film is a big film in any year, but No Time to Die has particular significance. The decision to move the film from its original April 2020 release date, I think, was to a large degree understandable, but was also a feature of the fact that, sorry, I'm just moving my dog away from my camera. This is the trials of being at home. But it was a clear sign of the seriousness of the challenges COVID would present to our sector. And you know, I think, you know, on the other side, the response of audiences to the release of the film in October of last year was seen by many, not least the sector, as an important bellwether for our recovery. You know, you'll know, I'm sure, and Clare has already confirmed that, you know, against those metrics, the film passed all of those tests with flying colours. It's now almost £100 million at the UK box office. It's still showing in some cinemas and still making money. And as Clara said, it sits at number 3 in the all-time UK top 10. I think quite aside from those impressive numbers, it was for many cinema goers, and particular for older and more hesitant audiences, their first prompt to return to the cinema. And you know, it was backed by a range of other, you know, undoubtedly less major titles, but which started to form that jigsaw of the film slate which we see in normal times. And then at the tail end of the year, I think, you know, perhaps unexpectedly to the extent which it did engage with audiences, Spider-Man: No Way Home was an extraordinary, and remains actually an extraordinary success. It's touching £85 million at the UK box office. It continues to show extraordinary legs, I think is the word we would use. You know, it's been the #1 film for 5 weeks. It hit £3 million box office last weekend in its 5th weekend, which is, you know, pretty much unprecedented, and it's clearly hitting the sweet spot of teen and family audiences. As Claire said, it currently sits, you know, somewhere between kind of 6 and 7 in the all-time top 10 UK titles. It will undoubtedly get to number 6. It may get to number 5. And reflecting, to have 2 films from 2021 with all that it brought in terms of closures and disruptions and restrictions and, you know, general concerns, to have 2 films from that year in the all-time top 10 at the UK box office is really pretty extraordinary. And the success of those films and that strong supporting cast saw admissions for last year, you know, just confirmed in the last few days, up almost 70% on the previous year, you know. And you know, while the glass is half full says that's a great result, there's always the glass is half empty argument which says, yeah, but it's still significantly down on pre-COVID numbers, which it is. But if you factor in that for 19 weeks of last year, cinemas were closed, and for much of the rest of the year, cinemas were operating under either direct or de facto capacity restrictions, then you know, that desire and that appetite to get back to those levels of success during 2022 and beyond is not just an admirable one, it's an entirely realistic one. And I probably agree with Claire's kind of prediction, or colleagues' prediction, that, you know, we may not just get there by the end of 2022, but everyone is absolutely confident that by the end of 2022 we'll be very close to where we were, and 2023 gives us the opportunity to build on and into that. So I think the message is one of great positivity. I think, you know, all I hear and see when I talk to cinema operators, large and small, and I do a lot of that given my job, but also speaking to colleagues who work on the studio side and in film distribution, is not quite a sense that COVID's yet in the rear view mirror, but absolutely a sense that we're over the worst, and that, you know, cinema can emerge revitalized and, if anything, stronger from this. I do want to just take a moment to recognize a couple of, you know, kind of clouds on the horizon, and you know, while that positivity is there, these are things which the industry will need to address and work together to kind of acknowledge and respond to. The first is the obvious kind of observation that the willingness to return amongst audiences hasn't been a uniform one. You know, teens, young adults and families have shown an extraordinary willingness to re-embrace the big screen, but older audiences, in particular older women, have undoubtedly been more reluctant. And that may in part be related to the slate on offer, but the Metrics Lab survey, which I talked about, showed that those groups are particularly sensitive to broader factors around COVID, levels of infection and vaccination and other things which the sector can do little to influence. And those attitudes are not cinema specific. You know, comparison with other surveys suggests that these groups are by and large showing a reluctance to re-engage with a number of other out-of-home activities. So, you know, we absolutely need to do all we can, and the upcoming BAFTA season, where the film mix is skews older, will hopefully help. But I think, you know, the hope and the expectation must be, as the general picture on COVID brightens, we can, while emphasizing the exemplary safety record of cinemas, expect to see that position change. The second cloud is again, a much more general one, which is about increases in the cost of living. I think we always maintain, and I believe with absolute justification, that cinema going remains one of the most affordable out-of-home leisure experiences, certainly in comparison to theatre going or sport or a range of other comparators. And I'm about to quote a figure which is always a source of consternation when I quote it, depending on where you are in the country, which is the average ticket price currently hovers around £7. So if you're in London and the Southeast, or you visit a boutique cinema, you'll be outraged that anyone pays as little as £7 for a cinema ticket. If you live in the north of England, or certainly large parts of Scotland and rural areas, you'll be outraged that anyone pays as much as £7 for a cinema ticket. And I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. So wherever the average ticket price is, I think we're mindful of the impact COVID's had on household incomes, and that's a trend, and that's a factor which will only continue through the year. So I think, you know, the response from the industry to that challenge, and the desire to encourage audiences back, has been what we've seen over the last weeks and months, is the implementation of a wide range of discounted and concessionary offers, and that's clearly a necessary response. And we at the association are also looking at what more we might do within existing competition constraints to help address these issues. But again, looking forward, you know, those considerations will remain, but the outlook is a hugely positive one. Not least in terms of the slate. It's probably an overstatement. I've heard one or two senior colleagues in the industry say this. It's probably an overstatement to say that the coming year will see 3 years of films crammed into one. But certainly from March onwards, almost every week we'll see at least one or maybe more major releases. And I'm going to give you a list just genuinely of the highlights. There are many, many more films which are worth your time and worth your investment and worth your popcorn other than that. But, you know, The Batman, Downton Abbey 2, the latest Fantastic Beasts, Doctor Strange, I won't give you the long title, Top Gun Maverick, Jurassic World Dominion, Minions 2, Thor Love and Thunder, Black Adam, Mission Impossible 7, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Matilda, and the Aquaman 2, and the long awaited sequel to Avatar. All of those are in the mix between now and the end of the year, and there are probably 5 or 6 times as many quality, diverse films underpinning that. And that diverse range of titles, the general sense of relaxation from the constraints of COVID, and all we've seen of the incredible appetite for film amongst cinema audiences, and their loyalty to the big screen experience, all strongly indicate, I think, that 2022 and onwards will be true years of recovery and renewal for the sector. I've slightly outstayed my welcome in terms of time. I'll leave it there, but if people have questions in the chat or want to ask me a question in the panel, please do. Back to Claire.
Thank you, Phil. That was great. And yeah, we're lucky to have you. I know you're sort of be dashing off to some TV appearance or other in the next few minutes. But yeah, I think that was a great roundup and great sum up, and yeah, really, well, a positive outlook for our industry. I will hand over now to Cristina, who will run through what we've all got to look forward to at the cinema over the next 12 months. Over to you, Cristina.
Great, thanks, Claire. So I have a few minutes to get you super excited about the slate for this year and to get you pre-booking tickets immediately. So Ian, if I can see the slate for 2022. So as Phil, I'm not going to go through these because Phil has very kindly done my job for me and named some of the amazing films that are going to be coming out this year. A lot of them I'm not going to talk about, but obviously highlighting like Downton Abbey 2, Jurassic World 3, Avatar 2 at the back end of the year as some absolute blockbusters. And then so it's just every month there's something really big to be excited about. So what I am going to focus on today is a couple of sections. The first being the comic book franchise, because comic book madness is upon us for 2022. I think a lot of it is obviously, again, just doing on what Phil said, you know, the 16-34 audience are just so dying to be back on the big screen that it's a no-brainer. And also a lot of film movement meant that franchise films were pushed into 2022, which makes for a big comic book blockbuster year. So a few of them that I'm going to focus on. Thank you, Ian. So the first one is, of course, The Batman on March 4th. This is going to be a much more darker, more atmospheric version of The Batman. So director Matt Reeves has done War of the Planet of the Apes, Cloverfield, so quite like a horror feel. Amazing cast. So Colin Farrell, we obviously have Robert Pattinson in the leading role. He said he really wanted that role. He was very drawn to the power and control of Batman. Okay, Robert. He also did the audition while filming Tenet, and he turned up to the audition wearing a vintage bat suit, which proves for us all that you have to dress for the job you want. not for the job you have, because he has gotten that role. So yeah, I think big blockbuster. I look like it's going to be a 15-third, because this is out on the 12 to 15 audience, and for them means that they just want to bring something a little bit edgier and a little bit different. And this is all set. He's only 2 years into his Batman suit, and he meets the Riddler. So yeah, very exciting. Then of course we have Morbius. Morbius is set in the Sony Spider-Man universe, so alongside Venom, if that makes sense to the comic book fans out there. And Mike Morbius is a biochemist with a rare blood disease, tries to cure his own blood disease, and gives himself a little bit of vampirism. It can happen to anyone, but it did happen to Mike Morbius. And Jared Leto stars as the leading role. He was obviously big in the DC universe in 2016 with Suicide Squad. And I think it's a really, really good role for him. Again, this will be a 15-third, so along the edgier side of the comic book, so less Marvel-esque. And then two big Marvels coming out this year. In May, we have Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So personally, I'm not the biggest Doctor Strange fan. He's not my favorite Marvel character. But anyone who has seen Spider-Man No Way Home, which, let's be honest, is everyone, is going to be buying a ticket for this film, because it is the direct lead-in. And everyone who stays for the post-credit scene, which everyone will know that it's direct lead-in. So already we're readjusting the box office predictions on that. It should do a lot more than we previously thought in 2021. Yeah, the character is, you know, one of weirdness, and it will slot right into like the multiverse action. If you know the Disney Plus people had WandaVision, it slots into that. So yeah, non-comic book fans, this will make no sense. Comic book fans, it's going to make a lot of sense. And yeah, I think it means big box office and big excitement. And then we have Thor: Love and Thunder coming on the back end of summer. So yes, I can't see your hands, but hands up if Thor Ragnarok is your favorite Marvel film ever. And if your hand's not up, then you're wrong, because it is the best Marvel release there is. And what makes that release so good is the direction by the amazing Taika Waititi. And when he came on board for Thor 3 and back on board for Thor 4, he really made something special of that franchise. And one of every character from Thor is back into this film, but one of the newcomers is going to be Christian Bale, who said he would not do another comic book film after Batman, but he is such a big fan of Taika Waititi that he's coming back to play Gore, the God Hunter. So that'll be quite exciting. But again, Natalie Portman has a really big lead role. She's back in the franchise, and she has some Thor powers. Obviously, Chris Hemsworth. And yeah, I just think it's going to be just a fantastic, fun release. Marvel's big on the fun releases. Thanks, Ian. A couple more to wet your whistles. We've got Spider-Man Into Spider-Verse 2, which we originally saw in December 2018. It was the first introduction of a Black Spider-Man. It was comic book character Miles Morales. Again, this was an animated movie that we really didn't know what audience it's going to land with, and really the profile has been really adult, and it just shows that it's just kind of bringing to life that comic book audience is veering into the animated scene, but it's not really focusing on family. So we're going to be, you know, different partnerships and different brands getting interacted with this film now in October. And then we have DC Flash, again a fun character played by Ezra Miller, part of the DC universe. We've got Michael Keaton making an appearance in this. We've got Ben Affleck redoing Batman, and again a really nice origin story for fun. Director is Andy Muschietti, who's done the two It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 adaptations. So again, a little bit of edge and a little bit of something different to do with that, which is nice. And then finally we've got Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which Phil mentioned. And Black Panther, I think for us, like, it wasn't just a movie, it was a real cultural moment with the reviews, and you know, it was just amazing and what we saw from that film. And I think as well now with the death of Chadwick Boseman, it's going to be a lot of talkability around this film. And he had Chadwick Boseman played the lead in Black Panther, and he had cancer. He didn't tell anyone, and he just kept working, kept acting, and he died before the filming. And to honor his legacy, they haven't replaced the character. They're going to use some digitally remastered footage and focus the film a little bit more across Wakanda, which the director Ryan Coogler just said, you know, rewriting that was the hardest thing he ever did. So yeah, really, I think it's going to be a really special film for the comic book franchise in November. We do have a trailer to show you for Spider-Man, but Ian, will we? I think we might skip that just for time. That's all right, and then we'll might show the final one. Perfect. So a couple more animated films I have for the family audience. As we said, the families were the first to come back to the big screen, and they were just dying to get those kids back in the cinema and get popcorn in their hands and out of the house, and that was fantastic when cinemas reopened in May for us. So some of the big ones for next year, thank you Ian. So we've got a really sweet film called The Bad Guys, which is an adaptation of an exciting popular children's book for those of parents out there, and this is where a snake, a wolf, shark and tarantula take on a bank heist. So I mean, just adorable. It's going to be super cute and run well over the Easter holidays. Then we've got the League of Super Pets, DC League of Super Pets. This is a really fun film. So this is again linking the whole comic book land and then bringing it into the 5+. This will be a real lads and dads film. I feel it's going to be it's Superman's pet dog who has the same powers as Superman, obviously, and lots of mismatched pets in a shelter get given some superpowers, which is amazing, and they go on an adventure. So this is Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart, which are like just a fabulous comedy duo, and they have obviously starred together in Jumanji. Yeah, I just think the voice cast is fabulous, and it's just going to be fun. Then the two really big hitters. So Lightyear is going to be the first Pixar spin-off origin story for Buzz Lightyear, voiced now by Chris Evans, not Tim Allen. And yeah, I just think it's the origin story we've all been waiting for. I mean, Toy Story 3 is still in the top 15 of all time, and this franchise just kind of keeps giving, and it does look super fun. And then of course we've got Minions, same thing, just a franchise that has really lasted. You know, it's been like a decade of Despicable Me. The Minions film did 50 million in the box office, the first one, which is, you know, way above average for a family release. This one is 12-year-old Gru and him training to be a supervillain. So cute. And of course, it has Julie Andrews as Gru's mother. I like to call her Gruly Andrews. I hope that's her character name, but I'm not sure if it is. But yeah, that's the main reason I'll be going to see it. But yeah, I think it's probably Lightyear and Minions will really fight each other out to be the big summer blockbuster, and they'll both run long after the summer holidays is over. Thanks, Ian. We'll move on to yeah, Christina's picks. I just wanted to pick some films to talk about that weren't really in a particular grouping, so I just thought I'm going to pick my 4 I'm most excited about. So I'm going to tell you about Dog. I'm so excited about this film. So even if you email Warner Brothers over and over and over again and ask them to make Magic Mike 3, they don't reply. But what they have done is they've made Dog, which is Channing Tatum. How do you make him more attractive? You give him an adorable dog. And he's an army guy who has to bring this military dog across country in America to a funeral, and this dog Lulu is just a real handful, and it's just him and the dog on adventure. This is the film we all need. This is the film we need for 2022. So yeah, please make that a Valentine's date. Then of course we have Tom Cruise in Top Gun. Top Gun 2 has bounced around so much. It's bounced around as much as Tom Cruise bounced on that sofa when he went to Oprah. And it's finally landed in May 27th, which is a perfect date. It's a summer hit. We all like planes, it's, you know, pilots, it's beach volleyball, it's what we all need. And in this, I don't know, I can't even guess how many years it's been since Top Gun. Yeah, I don't know if you know the answer, but it's 35 years, it's 2022. So I mean, Tom Cruise looks the same. I don't know how he does it. He looks the same. Amazing cast. Miles Teller is introduced, Jennifer Connelly is introduced. Val Kilmer actually like approached the film because he wanted to be in it so much. Tom Cruise gets to do what he likes best, which is, you know, flying planes and probably crashing motorbikes and jumping off buildings. And yeah, it's gonna be a big hit for the summer. Then I think watching horror in the cinema is one of the best things we can do. It's just very thrilling, and one of the horrors I'm most excited about is Black Phone. It's Ethan Hawke as a child snatcher. And this black phone tries to help the kid he's kidnapped. His previous victims give him hints to free. So I mean, very creepy and very dark. But yeah, I just think it's going to be exciting. It's got real like It 2, Stranger Things tone about it, and it's just fabulous. So yeah, if you like a good scare in the cinema, I'd really recommend this one. And then finally we have the Elvis biopic. So this is I mean, no one needs to question the popularity of Elvis. No one needs to question the success we've seen in the last few years with, you know, big musical biopics like Bohemian Rhapsody, like Rocket Man. This year we have the Bee Gees film. We have Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody in the back end of the year. And this is just going to be absolutely fantastic. And I think it's kind of the ticket sales are done before, you know, anyone even needs to show a trailer, which is quite exciting. And then Tom Hanks does make an appearance, and he does make every film better. Ian, if we have time, we could show the top Gun 2 trailer. But Claire, if you want to move on to Q&A, is absolutely fine. Thank you.
Your instructor is one of the finest pilots this program has ever produced. His exploits are legendary. What he has to teach you may very well mean the difference between life and death.
Your reputation precedes you.
I have to admit, I wasn't expecting an invitation back.
They're called orders, Maverick.
This is your captain speaking. Today's exercise is dogfighting.
2 versus 1? He's got to be kidding. What the hell?
Thank you. Wow, that was what a way to end the webinar. And apologies, we are running over for a few minutes, but we've still got a good number of attendees, so thanks for staying with us. And if you are able to stay for a few minutes more, just to cover a few of the questions, I had lots of questions in the chat, so I'll just hand over to Jamie now to see what we've got for the panel. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for contributing.
Thanks, Claire. So we've had quite a few questions in, so I've just tried to align some into one long-gated question because they're all sort of crossovers as such. The first question is around creative, and Claire, I'm going to put it to you on this one, but it feels that cinema, as someone's asked, that it feels like cinema advertising creative has become poorer over the last few years. Would we agree with that, or have we seen, or is this a short-term thing because of the pandemic, or is there, or are we seeing it just that advertisers just using TV standard copy to put on big screens?
Thanks, Jamie, and thanks for asking the question. I would say that, yeah, I mean, a lot of our content is TV content. We always encourage brands to run longer form content. You know, we've got this enormous screen and, you know, impactful environment. But we have been working over recent years to create bespoke content for brands. Ellie mentioned Green and Blacks earlier on. We've worked on Shamble, we've worked on Clean Co. So we always, you know, we always are ready to have conversations about the creative. I wouldn't say that the content, that the creative content had changed in a negative way really over the last few years. But I always think there's scope to talk to brands about creating something unique for cinema.
I think I can add a bit to that as well. So when we plan the development of a new TV ad kind of 6 months in advance. So the majority of our TV ads length is 30 seconds. We'll launch with 2 60 seconds and then it will run for 30 seconds for the foreseeable future. So when we're planning the development of the ads, cinema will always plan for a 60. So it's part of our kind of media mix because you've got that such attentive viewer. I think creatively it brings to life more of the storytelling from our advertising.
Thanks, guys. Next question is, I think for you, Phil. It's a mixture of questions here. You obviously talked a bit about the audiences and how to attract the older audiences back, and with films like Downton Abbey coming out, what are the sort of, with the general public not being, with research has shown that general public aren't aware of some of the films that are being released over the upcoming months and releases, and what are the filmmakers and distributors doing around marketing? There hasn't seemed to have been as much marketing around films as such. I'm saying that Spider-Man, I saw it everywhere. What are they doing in terms of making those audiences come back to make sure they are a success, like for the older audiences around Downton Abbey?
So I think we're just emerging from a period of understandable uncertainty. I mean, you know, one of the joys of life for me for the last 2 years was emailing my members on an almost weekly basis to say, you remember that film that's supposed to be coming out in a couple of weeks' time? It's now coming out sometime in 2021 and then 2022. We're out of that. I mean, you know, clearly we're still seeing some small movements. So Morbius, the Sony film, moved to I think the 1st of April, and you know, Disney have pulled Turning Red out of cinemas, and that's a different discussion. But I think we're confident that as there is greater confidence and solidity around the slate, that ability to, you know, go all guns blazing in terms of marketing films is starting to come back. And you said what you said about Spider-Man, and I think, you know, the conversations we're having with distributors are around, you know, kind of ensuring that you know, in your face marketing starts to become much more of a reality. It's been a casualty of COVID over the last 2 years, you know, and one of the reasons why films were often moved out of date even when UK cinemas were open is that the habit, particularly of the major studios, is to go day and date globally and to push all of their marketing behind that one date or that very short kind of window when the film's being released across the globe. As we're seeing that firm up again, there is a definite sense of that momentum picking up. As I said, you know, in terms of particular audience segments, it's definitely a point of discussion across the industry, you know, in terms of ensuring we have a diverse slate mix. You know, it's not all superhero films, it's not all animations, but it's also around, as I also said, you know, and this is something we have much less ability to influence, a whole range of broader considerations around COVID and COVID safety. We'll do what we can in terms of making sure cinemas are as safe as possible and promoting that as much as possible. But, you know, without sounding too fatalistic about this, to a degree, we need to, you know, watch, you know, the restrictions be removed as they have in England and Scotland over the last 24 hours, and the public mood catch up such that those audience segments are ready to return to cinema.
Okay, thanks, Phil. One of the questions we got asked was that it's really encouraging to hear that the UK obviously being resilient and obviously audiences wanting to return, and our forecast for admissions and is strong for this year. Are we seeing that across other markets and territories across the world? Who would like to take that?
Well, I mean, sorry, you got bored of my voice. I mean, as well as the day job, I also head up the trade body for European cinema operators. And yes, a Brit doing that is a very odd thing. But you know, what we are seeing is everyone is on the same trajectory, although at different points on it. So particularly with Omicron, I think it's fair to say that the UK probably leads the way in terms of its emergence from that, and a number of other European territories are you know, kind of slightly lagging, shall we say, in terms of that. But everyone expects this to be something which is, you know, kind of hopefully in the rearview mirror within a month or so. And what we've seen across certainly other European territories is absolutely that appetite to return, absolutely that willingness to engage. Some of the same challenges around which audiences return and which don't. But it's a global phenomenon, essentially, and certainly true in the US as well. That, you know, once cinemas reopen, audiences want to come back. They want to re-engage with the big screen experience. And in fact, you know, that thing about you only miss something when it's not there. The last 2 years, as in many audience members' mind, reinforced their attachment and their emotion towards the big screen rather than reduced it.
Great, thank you. You pretty much answered a mix of the questions for us around film genres and audiences returning. So any other questions? I know we're short on time. So the other questions that are in there, we'll respond to the people individually who put forward questions. But back to you for now, Claire.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks everyone who's joined us this morning. Thanks to all our attendees and all our speakers. Really hope that you've enjoyed the session as much as I have. I am biased, of course. But yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, this session will be recorded, which I didn't mention at the start. So if you've got any colleagues who would like to catch up, we will post it on in the usual places. So thanks so much. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Make sure you go to the cinema soon. Bye. Hi everyone. As we didn't have time for all the questions as part of our webinar, we thought we'd come back and share them with you. So I'll read out some of the questions and then follow up with the answers. So the first question which came through was, are we seeing some film genres doing better at the box office since the start of the pandemic and some less so? Is there a trend that bigger productions will keep with a theatrical release while smaller ones will go straight to streaming? So we are definitely seeing the genres performing well that appeal to the audiences that Phil mentioned. So the families, the teens, the young adults, and I think Spider-Man is testament to that. And in terms of you know, whether or not bigger productions will keep the theatrical release, well, during the pandemic, there was the rise of the hybrid model, with the exception of Sony, who always stuck to a theatrical release. So that we've seen that the major studios such as Disney and Warner are reverting back to their pre-pandemic model. So with the exclusive window of 45 days for blockbusters and 30 days for their smaller releases. So I hope that answers that question. The next question which came through is, what do you think the impact will be of same-day streaming release / shortening of theatrical window? So it's a bit similar to the first question, but with regards to the impact. And again, I'm sort of referring back to Phil's answer. You know, we've got so much choice. We've got over 900 films we'll have this year released in the cinema. And we know that people who love film watch film across every platform, so you won't get a chance to see every single film in the cinema. So in terms of the impact on audiences, we don't anticipate there'll be a huge impact. So the next question is, are you worried about a crammed slate, meaning cinema fatigue, i.e. people unlikely to see all these huge films they would have otherwise gone to see / over 3 a year? Well, the average frequency for cinema going is 3 per year. So the crammed film slate, if anything, could have a positive impact because, you know, there's more of these tentpole movies which will, while they might have been staggered over a longer period, we're seeing more being crammed in. So, you know, we could have the situation where people's frequency increases this year. It'll be interesting to look at the stats when we get to the end of 2022. So the final question is, how do you think Downton 2 will do at the box office, given the Metrics Lab data points to older women being least likely to return to the cinema? Well, I think and what we've seen with Bond specifically, before Bond came out, you know, we were really struggling to attract an older audience, but the fact that there was this, you know, this content that everyone of this demographic wanted to go and see was enough to lure people out of the house. So if there's content and if there's product for this audience, then they will come. So we feel very positive about Downton 2, and the fact that you know, this film does have a huge appeal amongst the older female audience. We envisage and we estimate that they will go back to the cinema and be lured out, and then the world will probably be a different place in a couple of months. Spring's coming, and you know, ever hopeful that, you know, that COVID is much further behind us than it is now. Thank you.